Welcome back. In the New Zealand Herald this week, an Auckland real estate agent warned that some house buyers were finding it hard to compete with cashed-up Chinese investors. Chinese buyers have been active in the market recently after new rules restricted how many properties they can buy in their homeland. It's causing some disquiet amongst those concerned about housing affordability in Auckland and in other parts of the country. One man who's not worried is Graham Wall, who this year has sold several properties worth more than $3 million to foreign investors. And we're also joined by Professor Laurence from Auckland University. Welcome to you both. If I can start with you, hello Graham, if I can start with you to give us an insight into what's going on in the market at the moment. You sell multi-million-dollar homes. Who are you selling to? Who's buying them?
A pretty wide mix, Rachel, you know, like New Zealanders, expats coming back, immigrants.
And who's selling them and where are they going?
A lot of older people selling big houses and buying lesser houses. And the opposite, people selling one, moving up, yeah.
And what are they doing? Are they reinvesting back into the market? Is that what you're saying, as opposed to?
I think I don't know exactly what everyone does that I do business with, Rachel, but it seems to me, you know, most people are just moving on, getting better, getting a better house, a bigger house.
OK. So we've been reading a lot of commentary this week that it's, you know, the Chinese are fueling this because of the issues that they're facing back in their home country now. Are you getting a lot of interest from foreigners? Is it coming out of Asia?
We are getting a lot of interest from foreigners, not necessarily Asia. We're getting interest from Germany, from recent sales, quite a few to Americans. I mean, we live in this paradise. We live in the only country on earth with a truly golden future, and the world knows it. And I think it's all to do with New Zealand's time coming, rather than a special slant of this, you know, specific race groups or anything. I think everyone's getting more attracted to New Zealand. I think international media is talking about New Zealand. Authoritative magazines like Monocle and the New York Times, like everywhere, there's great New Zealand stories happening everywhere. So from outside, it's fabulous, this country. It's pretty good from inside
it is too. So what you're saying is that basically people are coming in and buying this top echelon, which you are operating in.
Sure.
And they're just buying it purely for lifestyle, really, the fact that it's, you know, God's own, as you say.
Exactly, yeah. But not just in Auckland, I mean, in Queenstown and Coromandel, Bay of Islands, people love this place with good reason.
Is that then having an influence, do you think, on house prices? Is that partially fueling it?
Well, only as supply-demand fuels every market, not just property. But yeah, it's having an influence. It's a good thing.
OK. If I could bring you in here, Professor Laurence, in your opinion, and let's look at the Auckland market for a start. Is it in a bubble?
Well, it depends on how you define a bubble, but usually a bubble is where you have a rapid increase in prices due to investment demand and speculation or attempt that we're going to have great capital gain. But I think at the moment what we're having is a relative shortage of supply of housing, but an increase in demand. So what we've had since 2008 is the volume of sales dropped significantly, but we still have growth in population. And so we have people coming along and people returning from overseas, has been mentioned, and people looking for housing. And so that's increased the demand where the relative supply has dropped a bit. And so even though that supply is beginning to pick up again, we still have that excess demand, and that's pumping up the prices. So it is people are prepared to pay these because this is meeting their need.
So you would argue that it's purely just supply and demand really that's fueling this, or is that the key factor that is fueling house prices at the moment?
Well, I think that's is a key driver since 2008. We were expecting a rapid drop. I mean, globally, people were saying house prices were going to drop. New Zealand, we dropped about 10%, but then we picked up again. And partly that pickup was because the volume of sales dropped. People who were living in houses decided now that they could stay there rather than kind of keep selling and moving on. They waited because the economy was down a bit. They were expecting that it'll pick up in some time. So we've had that volume has dropped. And so the demand has been built up again, and so that's caused prices to go up.
So what's the outlook then? What do you foresee in your, housing crystal ball?
Well, I think the Productivity Commission and also work done by the Auckland Council for the Auckland Plan indicates that unless there's a significant increase in supply, the Auckland region, for example, in the long term will have an undersupply of housing. So long term, there's going to be upward pressure on prices.
So how do you then increase the supply? We're hearing a lot of talk about affordable housing, what Labor's introduced. National has opened up a whole lot of land in the Hobsonville area of Auckland. Will that do it?
Unfortunately, property is an extremely complex commodity, and overseas countries that have had massive increases in supply, Ireland and Spain, for example, they've had massive increase in supply, but also prices have gone up. So it's a combination of supply, but also the availability of credit, and whether you have a credit loan-induced boom as well. So there's a combination of providing housing, but also to what extent people then have access to increased credit, and whether that fuels extra boom.
OK, I want to just have a look at some of the homes that Graham Wall has been selling. We've got some fabulous images here that the vast majority of us will never be able to buy. However, where is the greatest need? At what level do you think? Is it the middle of the road? Is it entry-level homes? Where is the greatest need for housing, particularly in Auckland at the moment?
Again, following the Productivity Commission's report, there seems to be a clear drop in the ability of median income households and families, young families, to get into home ownership. And so I suppose that area of just the entry into home ownership is a key issue. And
do we need to change our expectations? You know, is the quarter-acre dream just that now that, you know, we perhaps were raised on? I certainly was in Canterbury when I grew up. Do we need to start thinking actually that apartment living, it's OK, we need to get our head around that?
Well, I think there is a shift in that happening. I've just finished a report looking at issues related to apartment living and medium density housing, and people do see it as an option, but they also want to have a life cycle chances, and that may be some time in an apartment, but maybe the opportunity of moving into a freestanding house.
Graham Wall, can I ask you, the Greens have come out and said that foreigners who are investing here in property should be taxed.
They're nuts, aren't they, those Greens? You know, what are they talking about? What on earth are they talking about? You know, like, if you want to buy a house in Sydney, should you be disadvantaged? I was thinking the other day, I saw that fabulous story about George Fistenich, fabulous, great New Zealander who we all celebrate, an immigrant, right? An immigrant who came to New Zealand and has done all these wonderful things and lives a beautiful life, and he's held up as he should be, as just a wonderful, wonderful example of New Zealand. We're all immigrants. You know, my grandfather came from Scotland and bought a farm, and we're all immigrants. That's the greatest thing about New Zealand. I think about 40% of 40% of Aucklanders weren't born here. You weren't born here, Rachel. So there's no downside to that. Everything about that is good. It's always been a struggle buying a first home. When I bought my first home, interest rates were 18.5%.
Yes.
You know,
yes, sure.
It's not any harder today. It's just that maybe sort of guys in their 20s and 30s now think they should immediately live in Remuera and Takapuna Beach. Well,
yes.
It's kind of hard, and I'd like to live in the Hamptons, but I can't afford that, you know? I mean, people just got to do that. If you want a quarter acre, you can do that real easy in Taumarunui. If you want to live in an apartment,
sure.
Do it in
I think things have changed. The actual rate of home ownership has dropped in New Zealand quite rapidly compared to overseas. And the proportion of younger households and singles, very unlikely to get into home ownership. And even couples, they have to get older, into their 30s, before they can get into home ownership. 20 years ago, people were entering home ownership at the age of 20s. But it was a different context.
But they were getting married younger and things. It's
so
the world that's changed. Housing hasn't changed. The world has changed.
So we need to change our expectations. Do you both agree on that?
Yeah, sure.
When it comes to buying into property.
Well, I think there are elements of that, but I think people confuse one thing. We look at the new housing market and they're $700,000 and they're 5 bedrooms and they're big, but they're not aimed for new entrants. They're for people who have moved up the market. So I think young first-time buyers are looking for existing houses, do-ups, and they're doing that.
The great DIY, yes. All right, Laurence Murphy, Professor of Property from the University of Auckland Business School. Appreciate your time. And Graham Wall, I'm sure you've got some houses to sell. I should let you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
to
for
meet
your
you,
time.
Rachel.